But what is going on with the supply side? Is this just Wall Street noise? What is really happening with the supply, the silver supply, the actual silver, not the supply of paper contracts, but the actual silver supply as we sit here about 22 and a half bucks? Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on exciting times in the silver market, because as the U.S. attempts to resolve the debt ceiling, which I'm putting my 2 ounces on, higher levels of spending, more printed money. One thing that Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen have not addressed specifically, even though Jamie Dimon, or even him and Joe Biden, they were hanging out yesterday. David, I got some footage of that, so that's the reason why you might want to hit the subscribe button and notification bell to stay posted. I don't think any of them commented on the silver supply, because in the midst of all this money printing and bond market catastrophes, Janet Yellen, maybe the investors are concerned that she's not going to get it done. No one is addressing the silver supply except for you, David, and some of the other great heroic patriots in the mining sector, which is not the easiest place to do things. And were there any other man in your position, I'd be a little bit more concerned, but fortunately you are there and you're here now. So how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Chris, all things considered. Thank you very much for asking.
Well, I personally think you're doing great. I know you were a little down this, not down, but you were feeling the stock price because obviously you are accountable to your stakeholders, including the shareholders of the company. So you care, yet I was trying to pump you up saying like, wow, how exciting that people get to buy an asset that's grossly mispriced. Now, I can't say that officially since I'm not licensed like a CFTC, Goldman Sachs, or JP Morgan broker, but I can say, just in my opinion, when the prices are so low in face of not just a US hyperinflationary campaign, but their friends around the globe are participating, I think there's a positive to that sort of thing. And David, we're recording here Wednesday afternoon, where you saw quite a spoof down and up in the price. And I'm wondering, and maybe we'll dig right in here, did something change with the supply side here for about 4 hours where the price went down or went up? Or I see this a lot, but what is going on with the supply side? Is this just Wall Street noise? What is really happening with the supply, the silver supply, the actual silver, not the supply of paper contracts, but the actual silver supply as we sit here about 22 and a half bucks?
Well, by the looks of it, Chris, I think several dozen mines across the world all decided to produce more silver spontaneously for a few hours, and then they went back to being normal mines again.
That's what I heard from Jeff Curry of Goldman Sachs. I think a lot of garbled noise, to be completely honest, couldn't make much sense of it. But David, in all seriousness, I mean, we leave this aside, but how are things shaking up here? We've seen prices come down from $30 in February, when even the CFTC acknowledged they were so concerned about a banking catastrophe that they participated in colluding to drive the prices lower. I want to ask you to comment on that, because that's beyond belief, and we'll let you stick to running your company. But we've seen in the face of that, when London had fears emerge that they were running out of metals, now here we are 25% lower, which is so shocking. Even the Wall Street Journal has noticed. What is going on with the supply side here? Is there more metal coming on ground, or what's happening?
Well, Chris, I don't think there's anything happening on the supply side. In fact, in preparation for this interview, I took a quick look at some of the results from the first half of the year. And, so as of June 30th, and for the most part, you're seeing actually mine supply of the biggest silver mines in the world declining year on year. So, I admit what I did was a kind of an anecdotal analysis. I looked up the top 10 silver mines, and then I started going one by one and looking at their production year on year. And not all of them, but most of them were down actually year on year. So, and look, that's just anyone can do that themselves. That same analysis, it's really easy. It tells me that there's certainly not a lot of mine supply, not a lot of new mine supplies contributing to the silver supply out there. And in fact, beyond just looking at the actual year-on-year numbers for this year, in general, mine supply tends to underperform because, mining is always a bit more difficult than people project into the future, and things take longer, expansions and new mines, and that it all typically takes longer than people forecast. So it's really not a surprise looking back now to see mine supply underwhelming, but that's what it looks like to me.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. But what if we factor that in with this little development? I mean, Wall Street Journal is for a while, the last time they'd written about silver was right after it crossed $30 back in February, then not a peep. Yet it's coming out into the open a little bit more because here miners labor to find enough truck drivers. They're throwing big bonuses, Olympic-sized swimming pools just to attract workers. Now, David, on a side note, I am here in Mexico where I do have a swimming pool. It's pretty warm out, so that could be a good strategy. Competition for skills is driving up wages, adding a new layer of costs. So again, I went to Wharton's business school, so my supply and demand understanding might be a little bit off here. But what happens to, with all else being equal, if the cost of production of silver goes up, the price comes down, what is that going to do to the actual physical supply of silver? Would that expect to increase or decrease the silver supply?
You would expect it to decrease the silver supply.
Okay. Now, what would you say? Because if your costs are going up while your revenue stays the same, that means the profit margin is down, so it can bring less silver to market for the equivalent investment capital. But what if we re-raised and said, things are so shaky that this is what they're saying to the workers, you're getting paid X, we'll give you X times 2. Sounds somewhat inflationary, but if you're going to have to start bidding because there's that much demand, they can't even get people to drive the metal out of there. What impact would you expect that to have on the silver supply, David?
Right. Well, first of all, we're not paying people X times 2. Those shortages can be very localized, and I think that article is referring to iron ore in Western Australia, which did have a huge run in the first half of the year, although it's definitely calmed down a bit. But anyway, getting back to your point about the silver supply, look, these inflationary pressures are happening on the margins for sure, and they're going to creep into everybody's costs going forward, and it's going to, I mean, either the price has to go up to preserve margins, or people aren't going to produce.
Which, despite the $3.5 trillion alleged new Green Deal, which seems like it would require a lot of silver, seems like a little bit of a conundrum there. Although, David, I ask you this, would it change your mind at all if the Wall Street Journal was reporting that rising bond yields and falling industrial demand, which would seem unusual in an economy that the Federal Reserve is intentionally lying about being strong and robust. Do you think rising bond yields, if bond prices go up, and let's be clear about it, this is now an exodus out of the bond market, up another 4 basis points today. I think we even hit 1.57%. So while the Fed says they're preparing to taper, it seems like their ex-Goldman Sachs Fed insiders, they tapered their own private holdings while the Fed continues to be behind the gun with us and the public money. But in the face of all of that, for a central bank that's supposed to provide economic stability, how does that make, and I mean, you're one of the people Joe Biden needs, if he wants to reach his Green Deal, he needs the silver. So how does a rising bond yield, is that going to make it easier for you to do what you're doing? especially if the price is falling at the same time.
No, it doesn't. I mean, obviously, some producers rely on debt, use debt to fund their capex, and higher interest rates are not supportive for that. So, yeah, that's another negative in terms of encouraging new supply.
Yeah, well, it does not sound like the ideal economic condition, although I guess the counter side to that is that if a company is able to maneuver through all of that, does create an opportunity. So let's leave Kuya aside for the moment. Let's say you have additional capital that you were looking to allocate to an investment. What would your thought process be looking at? I mean, if an investor has a stock market bubble or a bond market bubble that's already started collapsing and the silver market to choose from, what might be a framework? Of course, not licensed legal financial advice, but what's a thought process as someone who's a scientist and has done things successfully for years with money on the line, not just printed money on the line, but actually your own money invested, shareholders who continue coming back to you because of your track record?
Well, to me, I mean, you'd look to get some kind of an asymmetric upside return for that investment. And, that means not only investing in something that's got a lot of upside, but something that has very little downside. And, when you find opportunities like that, whether it's a stock or a specific project, mining project, in my case, to me, that's the best place to invest. And certainly for my, from my, experience, I think funding projects is one of the biggest risks, regardless of where they're located, and regardless of the other technical merits of a project. Getting that project financed it's a big risk, because there's first of all the question of whether or not it's even possible, and then there's what is it going to cost the shareholders or the company to do that. And therefore smaller is better in my mind. If you can get into production with a project that requires less capex, that's a better trade than often than a big project that requires tons and tons of capex. Maybe higher profile, maybe sexier, but it's fraught with a lot more risk.
So David, obviously you're in Peru with Kuya Silver. I get updates from my man Jeff Barber on the Peru political situation. Can you give folks an update on what's going on there? Any challenges that you've run into, and just any general thoughts or comments people should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the sort of the local level, things have really calmed down, and we've been able to operate pretty smoothly since August. Sort of a month or so after the election results and the new government was installed. There's definitely been, at the very high levels, there's been some strange proposals and headlines and stuff. Although one, positive development that's happened just in the past 24 hours is that the president the president of Peru has proposed a new cabinet, and it appears to be a more sort of moderate and overall just more professional cabinet in terms of the experience of the ministers that he's proposing. And so this actually looks like a pretty smart move, as opposed to the initial cabinet that was around for a few weeks or a month or so, which was composed mostly of close sort of party insiders, not necessarily based on strong merits. This cabinet looks a lot more well-rounded, and from what I'm hearing, people are reacting positively to it, and so that I think bodes well for the next several months in terms of getting Peru back on track.
Well, my guess is that if the Peruvian government were thinking about the post-reset price of silver, they would probably be incredibly kind to you going forward, which hopefully will be the case. David, before we wrap up here, can you give us an update on what's on your immediate docket? Any other notes on the company, Kuya Silver, as you are building the next high margin silver company in the world? Anything to share there?
Yeah, one thing I'll just mention, since you've given me the opportunity, Chris, is that today actually happens to be our 1-year anniversary of getting listed. So, you know, we're very, you know, proud of what we've accomplished over the last year. You know, we've been able to do a lot, and you know, some of the things that we were able to do, we didn't expect when we got listed, like some of the acquisitions we've made, but you know, so I think we're a much better company today, a year on, than we were when we listed. And so that's very, very exciting. Look, going forward, we're very busy behind the scenes at really in Peru with our project, you know, working on basically getting everything ready so that we can be in a position to start construction early next year. And so there's a number of, you know, I would call it sort of pre-construction things we need to tick off the list, and we'll provide, you know, updates as we can. At the same time, we're going to go back into the field and sort of reinvigorate our exploration program, because we did make a lot of very exciting new discoveries earlier on in the first half of the year. So we are now prepared to get back into the field, and we'll have news on that. And at the same time, we do have our second project in Canada, which, you know, we've been working on steadily over the past several months. Results have been slow. That's partly an industry issue. And so I would expect between now and the end of the year, we'll have several new announcements on that as well, which, you know, I think will be good.
Well, I will be looking forward to seeing how that goes. And David, for folks at home, if they'd like to stay in touch, or I know you have an email list, what's the best way if they have questions, or how they can stay posted?
The best way is to jump on our website, kuyasilver.com, and they can, you know, sign up to get the emails. They can book a call with management as well. If you have any, you know, immediate stuff you want to discuss, that's a great way to do it. And yeah, we try and make ourselves very accessible for our shareholders and interested investors, and so we look forward to chatting with you.
Well, I appreciate that, David. I always look forward to our talks on the show, offline from the show. It's fun talking with people who are passionate about what they're doing, know what they're doing, especially in an industry where I think the days of this mismatch in price are rapidly coming to an end. And I know it's harder for the folks running the companies than for me to be happy that, all right, well, I'd like the price to go up, but I guess I have a chance to earn more money and buy more shares, which I think will be quite stunning. I can't imagine 10 years from now we're checking back in on how this has all gone. But again, you got to make your own decisions at home, but that's how to reach David, also in the link below. So David, thank you for checking in again and letting us know that the silver supply doesn't seem to be getting any easier either. And we'll look forward to talking with you again soon.
Okay, I look forward to it, Chris. Thanks.